What's up everybody, this is Zoya, the Russian Korean. And today's video is going to be a little different. I've been meaning to make it for a while, but kind of didn't really have the opportunity to get around it just because of all the new stuff that's been coming out with Leak. But I did want to make more videos related to just like vlogs and talking points that I guess I just had on my mind or people were asking me about. I actually get this question quite often during streams and also in the comment section. Things about like asking what I do and where I studied or what I learned and things like that. And I think it's a pretty interesting topic in itself because it's really relevant to my life overall. So today I just wanted to talk about that and just kind of offer my opinion. But before we begin, if you enjoy my content, please like this video, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you enjoy streams, I do have a Twitch channel, so you can follow me there. All the links are in the description. And so with that out of the way, let's dive into the topic. So today I will just talk about my experience with education and what I learned from it and maybe, you know, offer some takeaway points. I mean, I'm sure everybody has their own opinion about, you know, the value of education and what you need to do with education. So I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will just share with you what I experienced and what conclusions I came to. Of course, it's probably going to change in the future because of, you know, as you add new experiences, then your position on certain topics, you know, just changes and it's totally fine. But today, yeah, I'm just going to talk about how I basically studied all my life, except for the past like a year or two, and not even a year. And yeah, what it was like for me. So first thing I want to mention is that I am a Russian Korean. I mean, that's, you know, that's in the title of my channel. You can watch my video on it. I made it before, like just explaining what that means. But basically, long story short, I am a Korean from Korean parents. So racially Korean, but born in Russia and raised in Russia. And so my first language was Russian. All my friends were Russian. And yeah, basically I like, even my mindset, the way I grew up, it was Russian. But despite being born in Russia, I feel like this actually applies in my observation. It applies to almost all Asian families, but it's like you can take a person out of Asia, but you cannot take Asia out of a person. So even though we grew up in Russia, we were raised in Russia, and we were in that Russian culture, the Asian culture in the household kind of always prevails, regardless of what's happening on the outside. And so, as most of you know, in Asian families or in Asian culture, education has always been a priority. And it's not just like a recent phenomenon. Education is always a sign of status, and in a society, in most Asian societies, where the hierarchical structure is extremely prevalent and where people tend to judge each other based on like the honor and shame system, education actually plays a significant role. So it doesn't matter how practical the education is in many ways. Like as long as your education is better than someone else's, or as long as you did better in school, or as long as you have some sort of education, okay, that's like the bottom line of it. If you have education, you have an advantage over other people. And the more the better, and the better the better, you know what I mean? And so even though like families like mine that are Russian Korean, we are not in that kind of Asian system, we still have that kind of Asian mindset. And so it translates into, you know, daily life, and especially in children's education. So for me, I was born in Sakhalin, which is like an island on the far eastern part of Russia. But then my family moved to Moscow, actually for my brother and me, so that we could, you know, have a better life. And so as we moved there, we actually didn't attend like a regular public school. We attended what's called a gymnasium. So they have like a system of schools. Like there's the basic public school, then there's a gymnasium, a lyceum, and like college type of education where they kind of, it's more intense. And they also offer more options in terms of like what paths you could take. So lots of different gymnasiums or lyceums are very specific in their like field. So the one that I went to with my brother, it was a language a language gymnasium, so it was basically English and French. Those were the two kind of strengths of that gymnasium. And if you went there, you had to take French and you had to take English. But overall, it was just a little more intense than I think usual, but it wasn't the highest intensity, but still it was pretty intense. But even with that, like, my education wasn't just limited to regular school. I also went to a music school for 7 years. So I graduated from a music school too. At music school, you take a bunch of different subjects, like, you know, there's music literature and music grammar or solfeggio. And then there's your mainstream, I guess, what would you call it? Your main subject. Usually it's an instrument or voice. And for me, it was piano. There was choir. There were a whole bunch of stuff there, actually. And so you would go almost every day of the week. I think I went almost every day except for maybe one day, especially towards the end. In the beginning, it was maybe 3 or 2 times a week. But as you get into like 4th grade, 5th grade, then you start attending almost every day, because just the classes, they are all on different days and you have to go there for at least one. So yeah, you basically have to go to regular school and then to the music school. So my average day looked like this. I would wake up around like 7 or something and then, you know, get ready, walk to school. Our school wasn't that far away from where we lived, which was nice. It was about a 15 to 20 minute leisurely walk. And then you would get there, classes would start around 8 o'clock, 8 or 8:30, I actually forget. And then you're at school until maybe around 2 p.m., 2 or 3 p.m. That's when classes officially end. But you don't leave school when the classes end, you stay for kind of like study hall. But the reason why you stay is because either your parents can't pick you up until a certain time. So basically the people there, they just kind of babysit you and you sit there, do your homework and eat lunch and just like try not to get in trouble. But for me, I also took extra classes. So I took extra French, extra English too, actually. Yeah, I took extra English and French classes when I was in elementary school. And then I would actually stay there, not because I couldn't get picked up, but because I had to go to music school after that. And so I would stay there, do my homework as much as I could. But a lot of times there was too much homework, so you couldn't really finish it all at once. And also because of the extra classes that I started taking towards like 3rd or 4th grade, yeah, you didn't really have time to sit down and do all your homework. So I would do as much as I could. So study, and then take extra classes, lunch. And then like by the time 4 p.m. hits, I have to walk to my music school. And yeah, I would just walk by myself. So yeah, as a kid, you just go and walk by yourself to your next destination. So you could take the subway. Sometimes I took the subway, but sometimes I just walked. Yeah, I would get to my music school around maybe 4:30 or 5 p.m. and then have my classes there and stay at the music school until maybe 8 or 9 p.m. I think. Sometimes at the earliest you would leave around 7 and then get home by 8. But a lot of times it was until 8 or 9, especially if there was like a choir class. So then after that, you go home, and this is all like elementary school, right? And you go by yourself home. It was sometimes kind of sketchy going back home at night, but you still went. And yeah, I took the subway and then took the trolley or the bus back home. And by the time you're home, it's like 9 or 10 p.m. You come home, you eat something, and then you still have a lot of homework left. So you keep doing your homework until like 11 or 12-ish, and then you go to bed and then repeat the next day. So you might be asking, how about social life? How about friends? Well, in Russia, the school system, at least the way it was when I was in school back there, I'm not sure how it is right now, but I'm pretty sure it's still the same. So in between classes, you have really long breaks. It's like first class to second class, I think the break is only 5 minutes. Then the second break is 10 minutes. And then it's consistently 15 minutes after that. At least that's how it was in my school. So for 15 minutes, you get to hang out with your friends and play, kind of, mostly. And so I'd say I had plenty of time to socialize. I made good friends in elementary school. And then some of those friends also went to the same music school as I did. So sometimes we went to music school together. So we would stay after school together, do our homework together, go to extra classes together. And a lot of times, those people would kind of overlap with me. And so, yeah, I feel like my social life was actually quite fine in elementary school, but still studying was very much a priority and took up most of my day. Now, that's kind of how it was until I hit 7th grade in Russia, which is about an equivalent of 8th grade in the States. By the time I hit 8th grade, I guess I should say, we moved to the States. Everything kind of changed, of course, when that happened, because I never lived abroad before that. I was always in Russia. I visited from time to time like other countries, but not a lot. I mostly stayed in Russia. Yeah, it was a huge change. I was super excited though to move to the States. It was always my dream to go to America. And when we went, it was like my dream come true. So actually, like looking back, it's kind of sad sometimes to think about it, but life actually was so hard when we moved to the States. It was extremely hard for my parents because they never lived in the States either. And for me and for my little sisters as well. And yeah, because especially they didn't speak any English. It was extremely stressful for them, especially for my first younger sister. So I have 2 younger sisters and it's the older one. Yeah, she had a really hard time. Because she was already starting to read in Russian and she was really good in the Russian system. But then coming over to the States, like kind of starting from scratch, it was just really stressful. And it's hard to watch your little sister like struggle that much. But something that kind of carried me through that time was the fact, like I learned later on that that's what you call internal motivation. It's like exactly what I had. I had tons and tons of internal motivation, right? So there are different kinds of motivations, but broadly speaking, there are basically 2 kinds. One is external and the other is internal. External is when something other than you compels you to do something. So your mom tells you, do your homework or you will not watch TV for the rest of the week. And then even though you don't want to do homework, you still do it because there's this external motivator of your mom, like not letting you watch TV or something like that. Like that would be external. But internal is when it's inside you. Like it's when you want to succeed. It's when you want to achieve something, or it's when you actually enjoy doing something. So a lot of times, you know, lots of us enjoy playing video games, and we do it not because somebody forces us to do it or because they compel us to do it. It's because, well, I mean, sometimes that happens, I guess, too. But most of the time, we ourselves enjoy doing it. And so we don't mind spending a lot of time doing it. And so when I came to the States, because I just loved the fact that I was in the States and my dream came true. I was there. It didn't matter that I didn't really know English. It didn't matter that it was difficult because I was living the dream. Like that's how it was in my mind. I went to a regular public school, by the way. Like we came there in about July and then school starts like end of August, early September in the States. And so like I just got enrolled in a local school and yeah, bam. Like just start. And so when I came in, I like literally knew nothing. And I didn't even like my math level was a lot higher than that of my peers at that school because the Russian mathematics level at school is a lot higher. But I couldn't even do the basic stuff because I just didn't know how to do it in English. Like the teacher would say something, you know, I didn't know how to say equals. I didn't know how to say multiply, divide. Like, I didn't learn that in my English gymnasium in Russia. I mean, it was very grammar oriented and reading oriented, but not really communicatively oriented. And that's, I think, the problem with a lot of actually English schools abroad is that they teach grammar, taking tests, and reading, and not really communication. I struggled with communication a lot at school, but because I had that internal motivation, I felt like I could do anything, and it didn't matter, and I felt like this is a good challenge for me. I'm learning. Wow, all these people around me, they're speaking English. That's so cool. Like, that's literally what I was thinking. I was like 14 years old, and even though I didn't speak very well, and I had to go to ESL classes, I couldn't be in the mainstream English class because I went to the mainstream English class just to try it out, and I had no idea what the teacher was talking about. It was like all like over my head. I could not understand anything she was saying at all. But for me, the challenge was actually the fun part. Like learning on the go and also being immersed in the language and also in this new culture. It was really fascinating for me. So time really flew by, and studying actually for me was fun because I felt like, wow, I'm actually doing all my studying in English. That's so cool. Like there's no Russian at all. Like it's all in English. It's all new. And I felt like I was like living in a movie or something like that. It was that fascinating for me. And all the difficult parts actually kind of just, I didn't even pay that much attention to it, even though it was extremely stressful. And looking back, like, wow, I don't even know how I did it, honestly. Like, I'm living in Korea right now and it's so difficult learning. I mean, age also is a factor, but at the same time, like the amount of motivation and just grit that I had back then, I'm kind of amazed at myself almost. Like, I don't even know how I did it. But my average day kind of looked like this. I would wake up in the morning, twice a week I would go to jazz band practice because I could play piano. So I thought, why not? I joined that. And then start classes in the morning and then, you know, go through the whole day. You're in school, and then a lot of times I had to stay for a little bit to pick up my younger sister from elementary school. So that was like what, maybe like 2 or 3 p.m. and then go home and eat something. And then, yeah, just do homework. For me, probably homework took a lot more time than for someone else for whom English was a native language. And so especially in the beginning, it really took me a long time. But towards the end, because I started taking more difficult classes, in the 9th grade when I came, I couldn't speak English much, so I had to go to ESL classes and had to take a math level like lower than I actually was. It was super easy in terms of math, but because of the English barrier, it was a lot harder for me. And then in 10th grade, I got a lot better and I started joining the mainstream English class, but I still had to go to ESL. In 11th grade, graduated from ESL and I actually went into AP Literature. And then in 12th grade, I was already in AP English. Taking AP classes towards the end of my high school days, I guess also meant doing a lot more work. I took AP French as well. So yeah, it was a lot of work and I did a lot of studying and I took my studying extremely seriously. It was not to do average or to just get by. It was to be the best, to do the absolute best. The all or nothing, feast or famine mentality is very strong in my family. I don't know. I don't know how it is for others, but yeah, for us, it was that way. So yeah, do your absolute best, you know, always honor roll, always awards, always have an A or above. If you get an A minus, that's kind of bad. A lot of times actually like getting a 98 was normal. And like if you get 95, like, I think the only class that I really struggled kind of with was chemistry. Like, I don't know, like math and those subjects, the math, physics, and chemistry, actually, math was fine. Math, to me, it's like a monkey science. Like, you just learn how to do things and then you just execute, you know? But with physics and chemistry, you have to use a little bit more of your critical thinking. And that's where it kind of falls off, I guess. I can't say that it was easy. I don't think I'm naturally like that talented. I don't have those innate gifts, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like the one thing that I did well because I learned to do it well was studying, like being very diligent with studying. And that's how I gained an advantage over maybe someone else who had a lot more kind of natural talent. But because they had natural talent, they could get by without studying that much. It was still not easy. I feel like if I say that it was easy, I'd just be lying. Like, it wasn't easy. Maybe for some people, it's really easy to study and do them. But for me, it really wasn't that easy. But I enjoyed it. And that's what made it easier than it could have been. My school didn't really have a ranking system just because the school is kind of small. It is a public school, but it kind of almost functions like a private school. It's not that big because of the neighborhood where we lived. And so it was a really good education for, I guess, the public level. But because it was kind of small, they didn't want to be like, oh, out of like 50 people, this person is the best. I guess like when there's like hundreds of people, it makes sense. But when it's like less than 100, it kind of doesn't make sense, I guess. But they didn't really have a ranking system, so I don't actually know what rank I was when I graduated. But one thing I know for sure is that I was one of the top in my class. And like, I'm saying it not as a way to brag, but like, it's just a fact. Like, that's how it was. Yeah, I graduated from high school. It was kind of embarrassing, actually, because for me, like, you know, you would think, wow, I'm graduating one of the top of the class. And I always dreamt of like going to this really nice university. When I applied to many different schools, Ivy League schools too. But I had two problems. I had a SAT problem and I had a financial problem. So the financial problem, quite obvious, right? You just don't have the money to afford college, but you still apply hoping that maybe you'll get a full ride scholarship or something like that, or like a scholarship big enough to be able to go. The second part was my SAT. So even though I took AP classes and I got perfect scores in all my AP classes, my SAT was really bad for someone who was supposed to, like, I was expected to score a lot higher. It was kind of a surprise to my counselor. She was like, do you like need some assistance or something like that? But like, I don't know, these tests, the standardized tests are very difficult for me. Like, I even took a SAT test prep class and I still didn't do that well. People who were on the same level as me in classes, and I oftentimes did better than them on assignments and things, they did a lot better than me on the test. And I wonder if it's just something with my brain that doesn't click with standardized tests. Like, I don't know how to take standardized tests, or is it because of the English barrier? I try not to use the English barrier excuse because, like, according to my AP grades, I was perfectly fine. So, you know, I can't really use that. So I think it's something with standardized tests. Like, I just don't take them well. And so, yeah, that was another problem. I mean, my scores were fine, but they weren't fine enough for, you know, those really top tier universities. So what ended up happening, actually, I didn't get into Ivy League schools and top tier schools, and I couldn't get into lower tier schools either that I applied for, like the safe schools, because when they looked, like, my academics were fine, but then the next stage is for you to provide like proof of your financial ability to pay. And because I was an international student, I wasn't a citizen or like a permanent resident in the States, I couldn't get FAFSA. I couldn't apply for FAFSA, which, for those of you who are not from the States, is basically federal loans granted to permanent residents and to citizens of the States to pay for their education. That's actually the way that a lot of people get into really bad debt when it comes to college. As an international student, you cannot apply for FAFSA. You are not qualified. And so I couldn't apply for FAFSA. I didn't have any loans. And the money that my family had was just not enough to go to school, to live in a dorm, to pay for it. And so the schools that I applied for one in Chicago, one in Michigan, and like I just couldn't go there because they were like, we're sorry, you don't have enough financial support or enough financial means to get you through even the first semester of college. And I was like, I was pretty bummed out at that time, especially because like during the graduation ceremony, I remember being like, looking back, it's kind of silly, but I remember being like embarrassed because all the other kids that were top of class on the same level as me, they were all going to different schools. Carnegie Mellon, New York University, you know, UPenn, and all that stuff. And like me, I didn't get into anywhere. I actually didn't have a school that I was going to. So I made up some lame excuse about how I am going to some weird school somewhere. And I think it was one of the schools that actually said I couldn't go there because of my financials. But yeah, during the graduation ceremony, they printed the name of that school on the bulletin. And then after graduation the ceremony is over, you know, people come up to you and say like, wow, congrats, blah, blah, blah. Where are you going? And I had to basically tell people that I was going to that school, even though I knew in the back of my mind that I wasn't going there, because I was embarrassed to say that actually I don't have a school that I'm going to. I didn't get accepted anywhere. Like, that's how embarrassed I was. And like, I understand that if you are maybe not Asian or not American or not from my family, I don't know what factor it is, but you would be totally fine saying, I'm not going to college. Or like, you know what, I'm just going to go to trade school. Or, you know what, I'm going to help out my dad with his business. And like, it's totally respected. It was totally fine. But for me, in my mentality, you know, it's like, I have to go to college. And these days I have a different perspective on it. But back then, it really mattered a lot to me, and I was extremely embarrassed that I didn't have a college that I was going to. So fast forward a little bit to the summer after graduation. I still didn't have a school to go to, but I felt like I had to go because that's what everybody does. And so actually, because I lived around Philadelphia, there's a university. I started looking at local universities like Temple University, and I didn't really want to go locally. But ended up, you know what, I'm gonna try to look into local schools, and ended up actually applying and getting into University of the Arts, which is an art school in the center city, Philadelphia. And yeah, I just, like, I didn't even know about the school until that summer. And like, I got a bulletin, whatever. And then I called and was like, hey, do you guys still accept applications? They were like, yeah, we have rolling admissions. You can apply. So I was like, okay, cool. I applied and got in. And then because I had really good grades and high enough test scores for that school, they gave me a pretty solid scholarship, but it was still very expensive. So I studied there for about 2 semesters. I actually studied for 1 semester, and then I dropped out and then came back in just because it was so expensive. I couldn't keep up. My family couldn't keep up with it. The program I joined was writing for film and television. So it was like the closest thing to creative writing that I could think of, because like I was actually interested in the English department, literature department, and that kind of stuff. And so when I went to UArts, I thought, well, there is this creative writing thing, which is writing film and television, so I'll do that. It was actually pretty fun. It was just too expensive. It was not very long that I went there. One thing that I didn't mention up until now, and that would explain kind of the reason why my family financially just couldn't handle that kind of burden. I mean, number one, we're internationals, right? So we can't do FAFSA or any of that federal loan stuff. But also my dad is a clergyman. So he's a pastor of a church, and it's not a big church. And he actually had to do his own work in order to support the family, because the church doesn't really support the family much because it's just so small. Like, everything, you know, from offerings and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys have much experience with churches, but yeah, there is some income that comes from church, but not a lot of it. And most of it actually goes back into the church, which is kind of what's supposed to happen. Yeah, we didn't really, like, we weren't, you know, rich or anything, or had like all these crazy savings from whenever. The fact that we could sustain ourselves in the States was miracle enough. But yeah, that was kind of another reason why it was just kind of difficult to find the financial means to support really like expensive higher education. So after my gig at UArts, I actually transferred to a school, local school around Philadelphia area. It's called Cairn University, and actually it's a private Christian university, and I liked going there. And that's where I graduated from. That's also where I got my master's degree. I personally enjoyed Cairn more than UArts in many ways, but I'm not going to go into that in this video. But anyway, long story short, my average day in college actually didn't look too different from my average day at school. UArts and Cairn, it was about the same. Like, when I was at UArts, I had to commute to the center city. When I went to Cairn, I had to commute to the school itself. So take the train in both occasions anyway. So I would wake up in the morning, take the train, go to college. And then most of the time, because I'm commuting, I don't want to be going back and forth too much. So if there's like a night class, I stay at school. in between that time, I don't go back home, or I don't really have a place where I just rest. I eat lunch there, and then I just go into the library or some quiet place and I study. So try to do as much homework as possible, try to do as much studying as possible. And I also had a part-time job at school. So yeah, I spent pretty much all day there. And then in the evening around, especially after night class, around like 10 or 11, I catch the train back home, get back home around like 12-ish or a little bit past 11 sometimes. And then a little more extra work. So keep studying until maybe 1 or 2 a.m. and then go to bed, sleep for maybe 5 or 4 hours-ish, wake up, repeat. So yeah, that's like literally my college life. That describes it all. And social life, not really. I didn't really have much social life in college at all. Like it was all just studying. I did, interact with my classmates. It's not like I was antisocial or anything. It was just that studying, performing well because I'm paying a lot. My family's paying a lot. I'm not going to waste that money skipping classes or, I don't know, like just doing subpar job. I really tried my best. All 4 years were just like that. I studied English, by the way. So I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in English. And yeah, study all the time. No social life. Graduated, top of the class, valedictorian, honors. What else? You name it. Everything was there in the package. But after I graduated, I realized I was like, what do I do now? So I will talk about the upsides and downsides of like doing that kind of education. But yeah, even though it's a great honor, you graduate from college. Wow. Like, it's great. But now what? And so I decided to stay to get a master's degree. And because my dad and my family is in the church sphere and like the religious sphere, I went for Master of Arts in Religion. And so my MAR, that's the short, I guess, abbreviation for Master of Arts in Religion. I did that at that university as well. So I was a graduate assistant. And during that time, I would work at the university as well as a teacher, as a adjunct professor, I guess is the more technical term, where I taught freshmen. So freshmen coming into college, taught them college reading and writing. So yeah, that was what I did in addition to studying, for my master's degree and yeah, writing my thesis and stuff. So that was my college life. And that ended not very long ago. Like that ended around 2018, maybe. I got my master's degree. And yeah, so after that, I thought I would either continue into higher education or I would work with my family in the church sphere. That's kind of what I was thinking I was gonna do. But I met a man. Anyway, that's a story for another day. Anyway, I got married and that kind of changed everything because my husband is Korean and he was also graduating with his MBA. And so, yeah, after he graduated, we came to Korea. So that's how I ended up in Korea. But yeah, life just twists and turns in different directions. And what you think is going to happen is not necessarily, most of the time, I would say, is not what actually is going to happen. If you predicted that something was going to happen 10 years ago and it actually happens, well, you know what? Good for you. But most of the time, that's not how it works. So now that I kind of gave you a gist of my high school, college, and I guess graduate, I didn't really talk about my graduate experience, but it was very similar to college experience. But in addition to that, I was also working teaching. So yeah, it was a lot, but I finished it. I did well. And after that, moved to Korea. But that actually is not the end of my educational road because when I came to Korea, I actually entered into a course to get my CELTA certification, which is like a certificate for English language teaching to adults. And it's from Cambridge University, but they do it in multiple locations around the world. So if you want to be a certified ESL teacher for adults, then CELTA is a pretty good option. So pretty prestigious. And so that's what I did. Also got my CELTA certification. So Now I teach English here in Korea too. Anyway, every year, every day of my life, except for the past year, I was a student of sorts. And studying was always the number one thing that I did. I always had homework. I always had to study something. I always had to attend some class somewhere. Like, it was just my life. Like, studying was what I did. It was my job that I didn't get paid for, that I paid for. But from all that, what did I learn? And what are some lessons that I guess I took away from it for now, and maybe that I could share with you guys? So I'll first talk about upsides, and then maybe some downsides, and then just my general conclusion. So the upsides of all that studying. I don't know how about you guys, if you went through the same experience or not, and what kind of takeaways you got from it. But for me, the number one thing was that it was definitely quite humbling. I don't know. When you are competing with so many people and you realize how many people are actually really good at what they do, and a lot of times better than you are, like you think you're the best, and then someone shows up who's better than you. Like some 14-year-old Ling Ling is better than you in doing your master's degree. And then you're like, okay, by the way, this was not a racist reference. This was to set anybody. It puts you in your place, at least for me. It put me in my place for sure. Like graduating from high school, I felt like, oh, you know what? I'm doing so well and stuff. But then, didn't get into college. And then, you're not top anymore. And everyone else seems to be doing it so easily. And why am I struggling? Why do I need help? But you still persevere and you still try and you somehow like conquer that mountain. And it's really, it puts a perspective, I guess, on what you can and cannot do. Another good thing, another upside of my educational experience, I guess, is that I got to see many different perspectives and views. So I know that's not everyone's experience, but maybe because like I was at UArts, which was extremely like liberal and secular, and then I went to Cairn University, which was Christian and conservative, and then I had friends from kind of both sides, and you know, just like looking at people, how they behave in different situations and what they say, what they teach, especially among the professors, like you really get to see different points. And what you need to do, your responsibility is not just to blindly follow, but to make up your own mind and decide what you believe and what is important to you, what's your priority. And like, for me, that was a positive takeaway, I think, from that education, because I think I'm not sure, I mean, what would have happened if I didn't have that, but because I had that, I know for sure is that it helped me solidify, I guess, my worldview and my beliefs, and also not just do it like blindly, but really assess from different angles. And like, there were lots of times when, you know, I didn't agree with the professor, I didn't agree with the teacher, but I listened. And I think, why do they think that? Why is it that they believe this? And, you know, you try to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes and see, well, what about this? What about that? And then, well, how about me? Is this a compromise for me? Or do I believe this? Or maybe I should change my mind, you know? So that kind of mental exercise really got drilled into me, I think, through education. Another thing also that is nice, of course, about education is that it really disciplines you. You cannot screw up your time management and still succeed. Like, you can pass for sure, but for me, succeed is to be on the top. And like, at least that was my mindset. Like, success is absolute domination. Now, don't take that too seriously, because I've changed my mind since then, okay? But that's how I was thinking back then. And it was like, okay, just getting a C and passing, like, that was not success. Like, that's not how I saw it. For many people, it was success. Like, wow, I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I'm struggling, but hey, I got a C. I passed this class. I'm graduating from college. It doesn't matter what GPA I have, you know, congrats. And like, you know, that's great, actually. That's awesome. Point is, you really learn discipline. You really learn to time manage. And after that, it just kind of becomes a habit. Like, because you've done it for so many years, you can't really undo it anymore. The one habit that I got into though is not getting enough sleep or having a really messed up sleeping schedule. So that's something that I'm still struggling with. It's only been a year that I haven't actually been in active study mode. And I still can't get used to it. Like I still can't go to bed before like 11 p.m. I don't know, something happens at like 10 p.m. and I just like wake up no matter how tired I am. And of course, the other kind of obvious upside of education, especially higher education, is that, hey, you get all these accolades, right? You graduated, you have this degree, that honor, this scholarship, that scholarship, and this award, that award. Like, yeah, sure, bragging points. But here's where we get to the downsides, and something that I guess you don't have to go to college to learn about. But for me, also from my practical experience and also from observation. So one thing I think that current educational system, the way it's set up, not pass or fail. I know in some cases it's pass or fail, but it's the gradations, right? What grade you get and stuff. It's very kind of achievement test oriented. Assessment is very heavily based on the product, not the process. You know what I mean? So like you could be actually doing a good job, but at the end you take a test, right? And that test is really heavily going to impact your final grade. And no matter how well you did, if you for some reason didn't feel good on that day, the final grade is going to really affect your final grade, which is going to affect your overall performance, right? And so in that sense, it's extremely test-oriented and teaches students, kind of drills students into this complete the task mode. So oftentimes, it's not very practical. If you follow the teacher, if you do what they say, if you take all the tests and don't complain and don't make trouble, then you will get hopefully a good grade, and that's supposed to be a sign of your success in the course. It's supposed to be about what you learned and what you take away from it, how you've grown from when you started until when you finished. It's supposed to be about that, but the way it's assessed, it's very often and not an accurate representation of what you actually learn in a class. Anyways, my point is the assessment criteria and the system that is currently in place in higher education almost across the entire world is problematic, to say the least. I mean, it works, but it could be better. Another problem, and that's actually the complete opposite of what I said about my experience. Like, I feel like for me, education, because of just how it turned out for me, it was pretty humbling experience. I know that for many people, it actually does the opposite. It makes them arrogant and condescending toward people who don't have that same education. So they sit in class, they learn about all these lofty ideas or like, you know, things that are a little bit detached from the real world. And that's like an understatement. But anyway, you learn like stuff like that. And then you start thinking that, oh, you're better than your grandma who never went to college and she doesn't know what she's talking about. And like, you know, stuff like that. Like it makes people condescending. And I've met with those kinds of people. And it's kind of a sad sight to behold because you kind of see how, well, actually school is making you look worse than those people who never went to college. So if you do go to college, please don't feel like you are now this creme de la creme. People have different ways of, you know, going about their life, and you don't actually have to go to college to succeed in life. So that's basically all I have to say there. Another thing that is kind of the opposite of what I guess my conclusion for myself, how I said that I got to see many different perspectives and make my own opinion about things after assessing many different views. Lots of higher education these days is extremely biased. I think not just politically, but in so many other ways. Just the pure bias is, I think, the problem with the faculty in many ways, but also HR, right? So they hire people they like. And a lot of times the like part is not based on how good of a teacher they are, but how similar they are in thinking to them. And so when you gather all the people who think the same way and then you put a bunch of high school graduates there who don't have an opinion and they are very susceptible to all kinds of, I guess, teachings. Yeah, it can go the wrong way pretty fast. Like, the amount of bias in many places is very apparent and they don't deny it. They don't deny that there is a bias. And, like, especially what upsets me is when professors say, you can make your own opinion, but on this test, you have to write what I taught because this is my class and I set up the rules. Like, how many professors do that? I cannot even tell you guys. Like, so many people do that. It's like, you cannot express your own opinion. You express your own opinion and you get a bad grade. So what do? You just parrot monkey your professor. Hey, good job. You learned, which is not really learning. You just repeat what they said, and then that's supposed to reflect that you learned something. So that's an issue that I had, and definitely think that that's not how it's supposed to be. But, you know, when there's tenure and professors and people who sit in their positions for a very long time, it's very difficult to get rid of that system. And finally, another downside is that, of course, you get the accolades, but in many cases, I think for the price, it's really not worth it. Like, if you want to go into a specific profession, you might as well just jump straight in and then get the education that you need later on, instead of like jumping into a college without knowing anything yet. And without knowing anything of the real world, and then graduating with something that is not practical or something that you're not going to use anyway. I wouldn't say that I have the same experience because I feel like everything that I learned, I was able to put into something in my life, invest it, and capitalize upon it, so it's fine. But like, some people would tell me like, oh, you have a master's degree, but you're doing gaming on YouTube. Like, what the heck? Are you wasting your time? Or like, what did you do with your education? You can look at it that way too. But from my perspective, like, I am still a big part, even though I'm not back home with my family and with their church. I am here in Korea, and I am very heavily involved in the church here. And my degree actually helps me out a lot because I'm helping out the pastor and his wife. And I don't think I'd be able to do that without the education that I had. And like, for me, that's rewarding. I feel like I'm using what I learned. And also just in my personal life as well, it's very helpful. Also, I know that because I have that master's degree, if I do decide to pursue something kind of further in this path, you know, with the church, like, I could always do that. It's fine for me. And with the English degree, that's fine too, because I'm teaching English right now, and like, I have my certificate also, and you know, I'm good to go. So I will never go hungry. So for me, it's fine. But I know that a lot of people, they graduate from college and then they feel stuck because whatever they graduated with is just not practical and they can't get a job. So they just end up like working at a fast food place or somewhere where like their education is basically worthless. And then I know lots of people, including my relatives, who did not have any higher education, but succeeded extremely in life, are very financially well off. And, you know, they're sending their kids to college because they believe college is good, but they never really had to go to college. So anyway, that's their decision. So from all the studying that I did and all of those experiences and I guess opinions that are formed, what's my final conclusion? I guess I have 3 points. Number one is that yes, the system exists. It's okay. It could be better. Number two, I still believe that education, higher education, is very valuable. Not just for the, you know, the little paper at the end of the day, your diploma that says that you accomplished, I guess, something, but just for the experience. But the experience of learning and learning humility and discipline and different worldviews, you really need to be, I think, mentally mature to know when to follow and when not to, when to accept something that someone says and when to reject it or question it. Basically, use your critical thinking to make your own decisions about what's being given to you, because not always what people teach you or what they say is true is actually true. So yeah, with that, with that, I would say those are my 3 biggest conclusions. Do I regret spending all that time on studying? I do not. I absolutely do not. I think that was part of my life. It's part of my experience. It is part of who I am. It shaped me into the person that I am today. And do I want to go back to school? No. I'm done with school, guys. I'm done. I actually wanted to go for a PhD for a while. And who knows? Maybe right now I'm like, no, I don't want to go back to school. It was too much. I don't want to go back anymore. But who knows? Maybe in like a few years, I'll be like, so guys, I'm starting my PhD in a few months. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. What do you think about this topic? What's your experience? What's your take on education? What do you believe about college? Should you go? Should you not? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. This was Zoya, the Russian Korean. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.